Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webcast, AutoCAD Software and What You Need to Know While You're Working Remotely. Today, we've got Ryan Wunderlich, who is our Senior Support Specialist, and joining him today is Heath White and Jeremy Smith, who are also part of our Support Center. So with that, Ryan, I'd like to hand the floor over to you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. This is Ryan. Those of you who know me know I'm very passionate about CAD, and we'll get started here. So a couple of things. Note, all attendees will be muted throughout the call. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please post them in the Q&A panel or the chat panel, either one. I brought two senior support specialists with me as well, Heath White and Jeremy Smith, just in case we run into any questions that I am not entirely sure the best way to answer. They are here as basically support for this. All of us in Support Center have seen a lot of questions about working remotely, some of the issues that we've come across, things like that. So I figured if we just brought them along, they can help out as well. So I'm Ryan Wunderlich. Those of you who know me, I have 35 years of experience in AutoCAD across multiple industry segments. I've taught AutoCAD at community colleges as a certified instructor. I've done more than 15 years in CAD management. I've spent over 8 years in cruise building, both new build and revitalization. I've done 5 years of basically CAD management support for a civil survey landscape architecture firm. Before that, I was converting 6 offices and over 200 users from land desktop to civil 3D. I've worked in just about every field except aerospace. So I've done mechanical, electromechanical, printed circuit board and schematic, architectural, acoustic, naval design, equipment layouts in industrial spaces, and a multitude of other things. Kind of like a jack of all trades and a master of none. I also have a bachelor's degree in business management and a master's in organizational management. And with us on the call today is Heath White. He joined our Autodesk reseller channel in 2006. He has an associate's in mechanical engineering, and he has 21 years of manufacturing industry experience, including fabrication and production, facilities management, CAD management, research and development for instrumentation and circuit board design, and new product development. He is also an AOTC certified instructor. He's a certified professional in AutoCAD and Inventor, and he is an Autodesk manufacturing implementation certified expert. And the other one joining us today is Jeremy Smith. He is also one of our senior support specialists for AEC. He's got over 25 years in the AEC industry. He's done CAD management role in multiple MEP and FP firms in the greater Boston area. He is one of our Revit, AutoCAD, and AutoCAD MEP specialists. He's actually worked and been at Autodesk as a technical support specialist, as a Revit and Vault support specialist, and as a sales enablement manager for AEC for Autodesk. And he's also been a consultant for 3D modeling and scan to BIM projects, and he is our current support lead for BIM 360. So if you run into troubles with BIM 360 and you call in, most likely you will be talking to this man. So here's today's agenda. Today we're going to talk about Autodesk AutoCAD working remotely and things you should know. So we're going to start with the different type of licenses, standalone and network licenses. And with network licenses, we're going to talk about borrowing a license, getting home use license, some of the issues that you will have connecting over VPN, some of the importance of having fully updated software, as well as how to apply those updates, how to do graphics driver updates, common issues that you're going to have with file access, slowness over VPN, things that you need to consider when making a plan. If you are encountering LoadLibrary errors when using a remote desktop connection over VPN to your local systems, some general thoughts on cloud storage and alternatives, and then we will have a section for Q&A at the end of our webinar so that you have an opportunity to interact with us. Let us know what your questions are. Now, we will have the Q&A panel open at all times, and as well as the chat panel. So if you guys do have questions, feel free to start putting them in there. If it's pertinent to the area or the part that I'm on, I will stop, answer that question, and continue. Otherwise, we'll wait for the very end of the webinar and start answering them one at a time. So, standalone licenses, this is the big one. So primarily, you guys will continue to work as is. If you're on subscription, though, you will need to connect to the internet every 30 days to have the license remain active. So if you do happen to take your machine home and get a no internet connection error message, it generally is a firewall or an antivirus issue that needs to be resolved. And there's a link here for what things you need to unblock. Generally speaking, the standalone licenses have more trouble at workplaces than they do at home. But if your employer is sending your machines home with you to work there, that's going to be probably your standalone license unless you're on networks. If you're on a network license, that's what we're going to cover next. But your standalone licenses continue to work as is. There's not a whole lot you need to do other than just make sure that you have connectivity to your projects. Right? If you are on a standalone user and are assigned one, so you can either install the standalone license on your home machine and activate using either the sign-in or the serial number activation. You would do that by going to manage.autodesk.com, logging in with your email address and password that you normally use for your software. And if your activation says sign in, you are sign-in only based. If you have a serial number and a product key, you would need to use the serial number and product key activation process to install that on your home machine. Please be aware that most home machines are not really good CAD-capable machines, so keep that in mind. So when we're talking about network licenses, we have two choices here. Network licenses are also referred to as multi-user today. So you have two choices. You can either borrow a license from a license server, which means you open up your product, you go through the steps to borrow a license. If you are on a collection or if you have multiple license types or multiple software, you will need to open up each product, borrow the license individually for each product, and then close it in order to make sure you have a license. If your license manager software is fully up to date and your licenses are fully up to date, normally the user should only consume one license. And when you borrow for a license, make sure you borrow for an appropriate amount of time. The default maximum is 6 months. However, if your company has implemented an options file, they may limit that to as little as 2 weeks or less. So be aware of that. And then the other thing is if you are taking your machines home and borrowing a license, the important thing is that the user's machines have to be able to cache or hold on to the Active Directory login credentials, because those licenses, when you borrow them, actually create some registry keys under the HKey current user. So if you log in at work under your username, but when you take a machine home, you have to log in as a different name, those licenses will not work. All right. Brett McCarthy, thank you. If you borrow from multiple software versions, let's say Revit 2019, 2020, AutoCAD 2020, will this tie up for network licenses? That is going to be very specific on the type of network license you have. If you are fully collections or AEC collections, product design manufacturing collections, the users would still normally only consume one license. If you have a mix of licenses, so let's say you have AutoCAD licenses, Revit licenses, and AEC collection licenses, a lot of that information is going to be dependent on how they are opening their software and getting a license, because there's a cascade sequence where it will go through and grab your standalone licenses first before it defaults up to the collections. So if you are all on collections and everything is fully updated, that means your license manager is 11.16.2 and your license file is recent. In other words, it's been generated within the last 12 months. Then chances are, yes, they will be able to borrow those multiple products and still only consume one license. So that's your first option, is to borrow licenses. The second option is to request a home use license. There's actually a process that you go through. You have to be a contract manager in order to request a home use license, or a software coordinator. And what you do when you request a license is you can request a home use license, which is an 800 series serial number. That license is good for usually 13 months or less, depending on when your contract actually renews. I've seen them actually only go for 2 or 3 months because your contract hasn't been renewed yet, and it only goes up until the point where your contract expires. You will need to request a license for each product. Are there any issues with VPNing in to borrow a license, then closing the VPN connection? As long as you make sure when you borrow the license that the notification comes up that the license is borrowed for a specified amount of time, however many days, as long as you get that notification within your software, yes, you can close the VPN connection, and then they will not need to reconnect to the VPN until that license expires, Jason. So when you request a home use license, sorry, we'll go back to this. The user, you install the software on their home machine. You activate using an 800 series serial number. If you've taken your work machine home, you can also turn around and change the licensing and put in the 800 series serial number. You will need to make sure that you install all of the updates, and I have another process in another slide where we talk about where to get your updates. You will need to have a capable home machine. That's the biggest portion of this, is that if you don't have a capable home machine, most people do not. They go to Best Buy and they buy the cheapest thing they can to let them surf the web. You're going to run into a lot of trouble with that unless you know specifically what the users have. And then the users will need to download the software from ava.autodesk.com. Not all software is available through Ava. Most software is, and it's going to be hit and miss for some of the things that you may not be able to get. So here's a bonus item. Which install files should they use to install? We use deployments, which I'm assuming shouldn't be used in the case of home use machine. Yes, I would not use a deployment. They're going to be running basically raw software, with none of your information, none of your pathing and things like that, and that's what leads into this bonus item. So you can transfer settings from a user's current machine to a new installation via this method. If you can import, export, backup settings to and from AutoCAD, this is only for AutoCAD-based software. So if you're using AutoCAD, you click on the Start button, you go down to AutoCAD whatever version, and you should have the ability, you should be able to see a folder in there that says Migrate Settings, and then you should have an import and an export. If they export their home or their work machine and then turn around and import that onto a different machine with the same version, so you have to be AutoCAD 2020 to AutoCAD 2020, that will essentially set up their environment how they have it, with a few exceptions. If you are running Civil 3D and or Map 3D, those shortcuts do not actually exist. In some cases, they don't exist for some products, but I know primarily Civil and Map don't have them. Here's a blog. This is how you create those same shortcuts to allow that to happen, so that you can actually go through and export your Civil 3D settings and import them onto another machine. Let's see. We've been having them use license pool over VPN. The only issues we've seen with the VPN crashes, so does Autodesk, or so does AutoCAD, is the user can borrow license or admin person. Nope, standard user can borrow a license. For home use license, can Windows license be used on an iMac? Let's go back to the, are you running AutoCAD for Mac? If so, you should be fine to install the AutoCAD for Mac, and then you'd be able to run. If you're running any of the advanced functions or features, so for example, AutoCAD Architecture, Map 3D, you would have to install Parallels or Boot Camp on the iMac and load a Windows OS, and then yes, the Windows license can be used. If you had, this goes back to Andrew, you've been having issues where if the VPN crashes, so does AutoCAD. Normally that would not occur unless they are doing something specific. If the VPN crashes, AutoCAD shouldn't crash. They should get a notification that they've lost their license, and then it will force their software to close unless you have tiebacks specifically to server paths or things like that, that when the VPN crashes, AutoCAD loses support path information, then it will crash. So that's one of the things to be concerned with. What I generally recommend is if you are on VPN and you are using AutoCAD, if you borrow a license and you're still crashing with the VPN, then you're looking at support path information. So you may need to copy files local and change some of the pathing from drive letters or UNC paths to point to the user's local C to get around that. Okay. Moving on, the importance of updating your software. Now, in any scenario you choose, you need to ensure that the software is fully updated to ensure you do not corrupt drawings and can successfully activate and stay running. If you have worked on anything 2019 or older, if that is your current platform, you will need to make sure that the users install all of the updates in order to do any of the standalone licensing, Otherwise, they will get denied because Autodesk did change their licensing. They basically changed their security settings on their back end in August. And so if you don't have all of your updates on your AutoCAD, it will not license properly. So there's two methods. You've got one to install updates using the Autodesk desktop app. Here's the walkthrough here. If by chance the desktop app does not appear to be working for your user, you can manually download and get them from the Autodesk account. And anytime I tell people to do this, always start with the older updates and work your way to the newer ones to ensure any prerequisites are met. One of the things I run across regularly with the Civil 3D side is people try to install Civil 3D updates and they fail without realizing that AutoCAD updates are a prerequisite. So when I'm dealing with Civil 3D customers and clients on a regular basis, I always tell them update AutoCAD first, then update Civil 3D. Now, moving on in this importance of updating your software. Generally speaking, you also need to be talking about updating your graphics drivers. This is also important to ensure that the software runs and acts appropriately. Biggest mistake I see a lot of people make is they rely on Windows updates to get the correct driver. That is not the expected or correct process. I generally recommend that you get the latest from the maker's website. So if you have a discrete video card like an AMD or an NVIDIA card, you need to go directly to the AMD or the NVIDIA site in order to get them for the most recent. For most Intel graphics, so for example, if you have Intel HD or something like that, you'll probably need to go to the maker of your PC to get the latest one because the generic Intel ones generally do not cover manufacturers' motherboards. There's a whole lot of things that go into there. There's a chipset that's created. There's some pathing and some other stuff that happens. So not all Intel HD is created the same depending on how the motherboard is manufactured and produced. And again, I'm going to reiterate this point. Most home PCs are not CAD workstations and may struggle to run CAD efficiently, effectively, and may encounter a lot of problems. So just keep that in mind. I know that my home machine is a CAD-capable machine because I built it that way, but most home users are not, especially if, like I said, they just go down the street to Best Buy or local computer shop and say, hey, I need a home computer to do email and internet. So, common issues, accessing files. This is one of the most common ones that you're going to run into is how do I let's say, I'll come back to you, Ken. That's a specific. So what happens if I have users using AutoCAD 2011 due to third-party software? This will be an issue with the latest software updates. Normally, it should not. You'll have to continue to use 2011 due to third-party software. There should be no additional updates to 2011. That product would have been put on the obsolete list. Oh, I would say four or 5 years ago. So one of the things you do need to be concerned with, though, is that if you have third-party software, that 2011, if you run into questions or problems with it, will no longer be supported as far as if you have a new install with licensing after March of next year. So after March of next year, anything 2016 and older, you will no longer be able to license. So just keep that in mind, Ken. So if you have a third-party software, you need to start looking at alternatives. So you have a couple options when accessing your files remotely. You can use VPN. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. Basically what you do is you create a tunnel from your machine to your office machines and server and domain, and you retrieve your files that way. You also have the ability to look at some cloud services, BIM 360, Dropbox, Google Drive, pCloud, OneDrive, etc. Those can be used as repositories. They can be used in order for you to access that information. You can copy your projects up there, and then nobody would actually need VPN as long as your project and information is up on the cloud service. Everyone would just need to be linked to the cloud. Some of the things to be aware of, slowness over VPN. It's typical for most users, and the slowness occurs with the open, save, and close process, and that's just due to the nature of the VPN. VPN, what it is it's called a virtual private network. What it is a tunnel in your internet out to someone else. In technical terms, if your pipe is 10 feet wide, to pass stuff through, your VPN might only be 1 foot wide. So you can't pass the same amount of data that you'd normally browse the web with without VPN when you're on VPN. So this can sometimes be improved, but that's usually something that needs to happen with IT infrastructure and whether or not they can increase the VPN bandwidth. If you are struggling with that, then definitely what you need to be talking about with your users or yourself is, can I copy those files local? If I can work on them locally on my C drive and then copy them back when I'm done. Things like that. That way you're only utilizing VPN for copying those files back and forth, and you're not utilizing VPN to try and keep that connection open. So the other thing is if you have not, we need to have a plan for this. So things to consider when making the plan. I'm going to say this, and I've told this to a couple of my coworkers, and I've also said this to a couple of people I've talked with. Now is not the ideal time to upgrade to a new version of software. I understand that the 2021 software is rolling out. Now is not the right time to be thinking about upgrading your processes. What I recommend is until this is over and we are back to some semblance of normal, try to keep the status quo for what you're using and the processes you have. If you're changing things midstream, you're going to complicate things for your users. You're going to complicate things for yourself. Okay? Upgrading machines to a newer OS may need to be delayed as well. That's an operating system, so if you guys are still running on Windows 7 and you have not made the jump to Windows 10 yet, you might want to hold off on that just due to the complexity of that situation and the fact that you may end up with more issues and other downtime problems. So you need to look at a case-by-case basis before deciding how to make changes and how your operates users. Sorry. You need to look at on a case-by-case basis before deciding to make changes to how your users operate today, right? Yes, sorry, Ken. Yes, so even if the 2021 is still on maintenance and a perpetual license won't work, it won't allow you to license it after that. If it's up and running and licensed today, it'll be fine. If you have to reinstall it and activate a new license, it will not allow you to activate the new license. So, Ron, okay, you missed the first part. So if I have a standalone license at work, I can download the software and use that license on my machine at home. Yes, Ron, that is how the standalone license is working. So right now, because we have an already disrupted environment, we want to minimize the additional disruption. So that means that we want to try and hold the status quo as much as possible today. There's already a large number of new learning and thought processes already occurring. Compounding that with new software and or new operating systems is only going to lead to frustration. And if you haven't started a plan yet, or your state has not issued stay-at-home orders, now is the time that you need to put this plan. You need to start thinking about how are we going to connect, how are we going to access our data, how are we going to do these things when we're forced to work from home. Most of us are already in this situation. However, if you have not been placed there yet, you need to start thinking about that. One of the issues that I have seen on desktop connections over VPN is if you're using remote desktop, RDC, over VPN from a user's home machine, and you start getting these LoadLibrary errors when they are opening up their software and cannot use. This is more specific to AutoCAD and AutoCAD-based products. Usually the Revit users are fine. It's usually AutoCAD that causes this, and it has to do with how Windows 10 handles remote desktop graphics, and sometimes a graphics updater on the graphics driver update on the user's machine can help this problem. Otherwise, you will have to explore some other options. Do you recommend maintaining file control if users are downloading off network to local machine to prevent multiple users from working on a file? How do I recommend that? That's going to be communication. If you have people that you know are going to be working on, if you know you've got people that are going to be working on various items as far as different files and things like that, communication across your group. If you do not have Teams or Slack or anything like that to communicate, now would be the time to start thinking about that, so that your people can say, hey, I've copied these files locally, send an email out to the team. You need to find a way to make sure that that communication is flowing both directions from the project managers, between the drafters, designers, engineers, etc., so everyone knows who's working on what. Okay, Aaron, and let's see. So Erin James, she sent this to me privately. She says, do you have a best practice workflow for working offline with SQL database for Plant 3D? We'll come back and talk about that. Will you be discussing best way to use Vault over VPN or the best alternative? When we get to the Q&A session, I will have my fellow panelists assist with those questions. So as Nashin, if standalone license, the question comes down to basically if you are assigned a license and have a standalone license, you just need to go to your Autodesk account. That's manage.autodesk.com. There you will find your software. There's where you would download your software for use. Okay. Otherwise, if you are not assigned, or if you are on multi-user licenses, we'll have to take this offline and go back over it together. Wow, never mind. We're at Q&A already. Oh, sorry. There we go. General thoughts on cloud storage. So if you are going to be putting your project data up in the cloud, if you're not doing that currently, right now, because of the disruption into our current environment, what I would recommend is focus on your current and critical projects only. Make sure you get your XREFs and or any auxiliary data. Do not try and transfer all of your projects. Try to use some common sense and only put up what you think you need. Again, most of us are in a situation where, if we are looking at these are the things we have to do, start thinking about these are the projects that we need to continue to work on. Start with those and then add anything as far as auxiliary data, anything else that you need after the fact, and then have a plan or process to add files that may have been missed with the initial load. So who becomes the gatekeeper within your organization, or who are the gatekeepers, if there's more than one, to make sure that if files are missed in a project or other things need to be uploaded from your servers to the cloud, who is going to be responsible for handling that? Let's see. Yes, you can. Oh, thanks, Jeremy. You got this. All right. So many of these items that I've talked about today, we also have a support blog. There's the link to it. You can also just go to blogs.rand.com/support, and it will actually give you the list of them. That's where we keep all of those. So if you have any additional Q&A, please open up the Q&A panel and let us know. With that, I know that the best way to use Vault over VPN, I believe that's probably going to be a Heath question for Riley Dyke.
So when you're using Vault with VPN, your VPN connection has to put you on the same WAN as the Vault. And while you're using the Vault client from the local machine to connect to the server on your network, VPN connection needs to be maintained. Otherwise, the client can't communicate to the server. Now, if you have intermittent connection to the Vault, you can check out all the files you need. You can actually log out of Vault if you'd like to, log out of VPN, and as long as the files have been checked out to your local workspace, you're going to be able to work essentially offline. But you will need to make sure that once you've made whatever changes you're going to make, you connect back to the server, you check those files in, because until you do, the changes and the work that you've done reside only on your local machine, and you have the potential to lose it because it's not being backed up by the server. If your company has VPN access, then you typically are going to work the way you always have. We have had some clients that, due to, like Ryan said, lower bandwidth, have noticed some performance issues. Solution in several of those cases has been to reduce the VPN throughput down to the lowest, essentially kind of throttling the traffic back. And that has allowed some of those problems to be alleviated. Your IT would need to do that for you. But I wouldn't do that unless you're noticing a problem. And if VPN is not an option for you, there are some other alternatives that our services team could discuss with you. But that would be kind of on a case-by-case basis, because VPN is going to typically be your best option.
Okay. I see here, Brett, you're making a request for a home use license dialog, making a request for an online asking for admin. Do I, as admin, make this request for multiple users, or do they submit requests separately? Here's what happens. When you request that home use license, you are requesting it for all of your network licenses at one shot. They will turn around and give you an 800 series serial number and a product key for whatever product you are trying to get a home use license, and it will actually tell you in the ava.autodesk.com how, basically what it's going to do is it will tell you how many licenses that you have. Does it remove licenses from the network pool? No, it does not remove anything from your network pool. Your network pool stays as is. Okay, these are home use licenses. What these home use licenses are intended for is for machines that are not connected to your network or travel laptops, etc., so that you have a standalone license that has an expiration date. Your license server does not. Yeah, borrowed licenses do remove licenses from the license pool. Home use do not. All right. Any other questions? We actually got through this. Let's see. Okay. So going back to Aaron, best practice for working offline for a SQL database for Plant 3D. One of our specialists here said, to the best of your knowledge, you cannot work offline with the Plant 3D SQL database if it's a shared database. Otherwise, you'd have to install on their individual machine, and then it would no longer be a shared database. So that's where we need to be talking about. Are you guys using a shared SQL database across multiple people? If so, then that's going to be where your problem is coming from. Yep, they are copying files down. How would you recommend working on a Plant 3D project with multiple users if they're wanting to download files to edit on local machines? Or there'll be issues merging back. And yes, Autodesk is offering right now, they do have an offer. I believe it's for BIM 360 for file sharing to basically let you kick the tires for a couple of months. Understand that setting yourself up for BIM 360 is going to take a couple of days to get everything worked out. Let's see. What about you, Heath or Jeremy, about Plant 3D? Did I miss our Plant 3D specialist and should have had him here because I was not expecting that?
Yeah, Paul's our plant guy, but as far as keeping that, we've got clients that are using Vault with Plant 3D. The thing you have to keep in mind is the Vault is managing the file information, but it is not managing the Plant's SQL database. So you're not really going to have an option as far as working without that database unless everybody's using a local database copy. And then, at that point, really, if you want to use Vault to manage the files, or if you want to use, like Ryan suggested, the BIM tools, you've got, with Plant, you've got the two separate pieces that you have to keep in mind. One's going to be the plant SQL database, which is separate from your Vault SQL databases. They're not the same. They're not managed by the same tools. And then you're going to have whatever tool you choose for your data management. And that's really going to depend on how you envision sharing and managing the data. Again, that's something that probably needs to be discussed with our services group so they can get an understanding of your environment, how you are currently working and how you intend to work, and then they can make a best practice recommendation that's specific to your company.
And how does somebody go about doing that? Do they contact the Solution Center?
No, well, if you contact the Solution Center, we're basically going to put you in touch with your account manager. Your account manager would basically set up calls with the services team and get that going that way. So if you know your account manager and want to contact them directly, you can do so. If you contact us, then we can get you rerouted to your account manager and they can set up a meeting with the appropriate services team members.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Okay, so Ken, you mentioned something about not updating to Windows 10 yet. For what reason again? I'm currently doing Windows 10 update first before updating AutoCAD for all users' workstations while they're still working at work and not home yet. That's fine, Ken. What I was referring to that is to, if your users were already at home, to not start pushing down Windows 10 updates to them yet. Let them run as status quo for now, and then once we are back to some semblance of normalcy, or you start having them come back in the office, then start working them through the Windows updates. That was more primarily for people working at home already. Because if you start rolling out Windows 10 and they start having problems, you are not there to support them easily. So that's usually where I refer to there. So Lily, you say, if I have a remote desktop connection, could I expect to encounter any other problems besides LoadLibrary? Reality is this, is that with remote desktop, you may or may not encounter some other quirkiness, as I would call it, from remote desktop. I work off 3 screens. I would not want to try and remote desktop in and try and view all 3 of my screens at the same time. Normally, if you're running an AutoCAD software and you get the LoadLibrary, that's primarily what you're going to see. You may notice that there is, well, actually, there's not going to be a may. You will see that there is some lag from the time you move your mouse under your hand to the time that you see the crosshairs actually move on the screen. There's going to be a little lag. Okay, it's usually not terribly bad. It's noticeable if you've been doing AutoCAD a long time. Otherwise, that's really about it. Because your machines are still in your work environment and they still have all the connections there, usually the only thing I run into is LoadLibrary or graphics. And if you find out that you've got a graphics problem, then yes, you may need to be working through that, but usually the graphics is going to be on your end, not on your work machine. Remote desktop is a good tool if it works for you. If it does not, then like I said, I've included some links in here where you can find the top 10. There's a couple of them that are paid, a couple of them that are free. So definitely explore the free ones. Obviously with free you get limited functionality, or it may not have all the things you need. If you get paid for, it'll be a little expensive and you may be in a contract for a full year for it. But generally, anytime we're doing a remote desktop, that's usually what I see is either a LoadLibrary or it's going to be a little slower response. Matthew, yes, I'm going to have this PDF over to Laura. So that's L Elliott with 2 L's and 2 T's at rand.com. She will get the copy of these slides that will have the live links in them. And I will get these over to her as soon as we're done, so you can reach out to her and she'll be happy to forward you this PDF. Okay, so Sarah, are there any issues using cloud products to store CAD files instead of a server? Not really, other than the fact that if you lose your internet, you lose access to your CAD files until your internet's restored. That's usually the primary issue with cloud products. If you have, because invariably you will lose internet, and depending on how important that project is at the time, you may or may not be able to deliver it if your internet's down for a couple of days. Generally, that doesn't happen. However, if somebody does drive a truck into the side of the building where the servers are, and I've seen this, and the internet goes down, it's usually not a couple of minutes to get it back up. So that's really the only thing to worry about with cloud products. The other thing that you may notice is that your AutoCAD files may not sync and replicate fast enough in the cloud. And what I mean by that is when a user opens up a DWG file, the created DWL, DWL2s may not show up fast enough, and potentially somebody else could also open up that file, and it would show both of them as having that file as an active file, and when they save, they may be causing problems for each other. That's rare, but I've seen it happen. Ken, if users are remoting into their workstation, does it not really matter where their home computer specs are, since the home computer is primarily a display screen? Okay, so if you are remoting in and you are using remote desktop connection, or RDC, there is a problem with how the graphics are handled on the home machine, which leads to those load library errors. It's either load library, you'll either see a load library error 86 or 126 are the two that I primarily see. And what happens is that the AutoCAD engine on the remote machine is basically the graphics are not able to be displayed properly on the home machine, even though it's just a window, and that is a function of something that occurred with the Windows 10 remote desktop connection and the updates. So with Plant3D, could files be shared using a cloud server and maintain SQL connection through VPN? Would performance be compromised? Oh, now that's a good question. What do you think, Heath?
Can you repeat that?
With Plant3D, could files be shared using a cloud server and maintain a SQL connection through a VPN?
If you're doing a shared workspace, that should not be a problem. Cloud servers, connection to the internet is going to be a problem regardless of if you're VPN'd or a cloud server, because connection's connection. So as long as everybody has access, should be able to collaborate in a shared workspace. And as long as everybody has access to the SQL, we've got some clients that are doing things like hosting their vaults on Amazon web servers, and you can either access that via VPN or can be set up for SSL access. That's a little more complicated, but SSL access mitigates the need for a VPN. So that is an alternative method to access it. So that would be a viable solution as far as I'm aware.
And Ryan, this is Jeremy. Just to echo something that I typed something to an earlier question from Sarah about the issues using cloud products for CAD files. Just to point out too that file locking in BIM 360 is a manual thing still. In other words, if the CAD files are stored on BIM 360, unless you manually lock the file on the BIM 360 side, there's a potential where two individuals could open the same DWG file, as opposed to if it's on a server, that sort of process happens automatically. So I posted an article that shows if you're working in a drawing, you should lock it to prevent somebody from opening the same drawing and overwriting what you did. So that's something that you should be aware of too.
Okay, I appreciate that. I was not aware of that, so I do appreciate you adding that to the conversation. All right, any other questions, guys? Give me just a couple of seconds, link right up on how to lock. That is going to be in the link that Jeremy shared in the Q&A panel. I believe he shared it to everyone. There's a manual process saving from AutoCAD through Desktop Connector to BIM 360 management. Yep, yes. There you go, Jeremy.
Just added a different link too that shows that specific lock unlock functionality in BIM 360.
Okay. Did you get that, Brett?
Jeremy, maybe you could also send that to me as well. And so when I send out the PDF from today, I can also include that link as well. Or I don't know if it's relevant for everybody, but we'll have it.
Sure can.
Yeah, if you'd send those to Lori, that way she can make sure that she attaches them with anybody who asks for the PDF too.
The emails are coming in for that.
I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've just about exhausted our knowledge base here, and I haven't seen any new questions really come in other than just the last couple from Brett. And I think with that, I think we can probably call this webinar done.
Awesome. All right. Well, Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. That was the Autodesk software and what you need to know to work remotely. Again, I'd like to thank Ryan, as always, for putting this thing together, and also Heath White and Jeremy Smith. Sorry, it's been a pleasure to have you guys with us today. It's such an unusual time, and you know, just trying to figure out how to help you guys is where we're coming from. So in a couple of minutes, I will have a copy of the PDF for today, but for the recording, it just takes some time to render. Once I have that, I'll be able to make sure that you guys have access to that as well. So thanks, guys, and stay safe, everyone. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.